Good morning and welcome to the third in our webinars for TN series. This is Serving Latinx Students from Culture to College Access. My name is Suzette Telly and I am the coordinator of statewide services for the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. Thank you for joining us today. We do ask that you drop any questions you have during the presentation in the chat because you're not able to unmute yourself. I would like to introduce Sarah Marrero. She is our new coordinator of College Access Communications, and she will take it from there.
Thanks, Suzette. Yeah, my name is Sarah Marrero, like Suzette said, and I'm newer to THEC, and I'm really excited to be here today and with our guest speaker. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce him. This is Julio. So thank you so much, Julio Salazar, for being here today. He is the Associate Director of Educational Success at Conexion Americas. He oversees the college access and success programs in their education work. And before arriving at Conexion Americas, Julio was the Associate Director of Partnerships and Programming at the Tennessee Educators of Color Alliance, and he directed the Ascension Project. So he also has worked at the State Collaborative on Reforming Education and in Metro Nashville Public School System as an elementary school teacher. So Julio started at the University of Notre Dame, where he received his Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science and Education, and then graduated from Vanderbilt University with a Master's in Education. He was born in Mexico City and immigrated to Tennessee at the age of 7 and graduated from a Tennessee public high school and is very familiar with the hurdles that he now supports with current students in the work that he does. So we're very excited to have him here. And Julio, I will go ahead and give you the floor, and we're really excited to be here. So like I said, like Suzette said, we'll just monitor some questions, and as they come in, or maybe leave some time at the end, we'd love to hear those questions answered too. But the floor is yours. Thank you, Julio.
Well, thank you, Suzette and Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving us the opportunity at Conexion Americas to come and present to you all today. And I'm just really excited that you're doing this work, that you're asking these questions, and that you're leaning on our organization when we do this work all the time to learn a little bit. And as we near here the end of Hispanic Heritage Month this Sunday, I think a really good conversation to have to celebrate the end of that month, and as we move forward over the next month and a half before FAFSA opens, and as our seniors in high schools are looking at college applications, and our rising juniors are starting to ask some questions as they see their senior peers starting asking these questions. I'm really excited to be here. Like I said, I love questions, so please put them in the chat, and I'm happy to respond after the presentation, but also during if any slides prompt any specific questions. So I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully I do it right, and then we'll get started. All right, am I good? Can you? Awesome.
Yes, yeah, we can see.
Well,
Great.
thank you again. Good morning. Thank you to the Tennessee Higher Ed Commission, to all of you for being here today. As I said, my name is Julio Salazar. I'm the Associate Director of Educational Success and part of the education programs at Conexion Americas. I was originally born in Mexico City. I immigrated to East Tennessee in 2003 as a 7-year-old second grader. And from second grade at Lincoln Heights Elementary School until my high school freshman year at Morristown West High School, I lived as an undocumented student here in Tennessee Public Schools in an area that had very few resources, no community organizations, and very little understanding around my legal status as a student. Eventually, through high school and after receiving my permanent resident green card when I became a U.S. resident, I began applying to college and found again that there was very little help or institutional support around navigating post-secondary education, FAFSA, scholarships applications for first-generation Latino Spanish-speaking students who had a lot of questions about their status. Eventually, with the help of a lot of really go-getting teachers and counselors, as well as a lot of my own research, I was able to attend the University of Notre Dame on a full-ride scholarship. I graduated with my political science degree before I moved to Nashville, got my degree, my master's in elementary education at Vanderbilt Peabody. And from there, I knew that my work would lead me to increasing access and opportunities for Latino students just like myself. I started out as an elementary school teacher, really focusing on that direct service in schools. Um, and when I got to my school, I was the only male Latino teaching in that elementary school. And that was a really hard challenge where I saw more of myself in the students than any other of my professional peers. So I was there for a year and a half before I left to start working in advocacy and policy. First at the State Collaborative on Reforming Education, SCORE, here in Nashville, and then at TECA, the Tennessee Educators of Color Alliance, which is increasing support and access to undergraduate students who are studying to become educators of color in our state. This summer, I transitioned to Conexion Americas, where I got to really do that work fully, which was the education work, putting all of my talents together, and working on college access and success programs for not just Latino youth, for all first-generation students in our Escalera programs, which I'll talk a little bit about later on today, but really specifically about increasing that access to post-secondary education for Latino students, which is what we'll be talking about today and what hopefully you'll get a little bit of insight about. So now I get to connect with graduating high school students, talking to them about pathways to professional and workforce success, guiding juniors and seniors through the coaching and advising process on the opportunities they can have, and filling the gap that exists for so many Latino youth in our community. And I'm really lucky to get to wake up and do that every day. And to do that this week, we had our fall break at MNPS, and we took our juniors and seniors to their first college tours. We were at Belmont University and Vanderbilt University this week, as well as tours at the Country Music Association's office and Mars Pet Care offices. So really focusing on both of those workforce and the post-secondary education pathways as well. And in the spring, we'll be traveling to Western Kentucky University, Berea College, as well as the Tennessee College of Applied Technologies here in Nashville and Nashville State Community College. So we really try to offer all the opportunities for our students. So I'll move here to our second slide. And this is just the Conexión Americas mission statement, which to me is really important to ground my work in. Conexión Americas has been around since 2002. It's a community organization that offers a ton of services to newly arrived refugee immigrant, and as well as all of our first, second, third, fourth generation Latino immigrants here in the city. We offer wraparound services for all of the students that we meet here in Nashville. And we believe that with the right resources and opportunities, all of our Latino families and individuals can belong, contribute, and succeed here in Nashville, in our state of Tennessee, and in the United States. And all of our work revolves around community. So you'll hear me say that word a lot, community. And that means a lot to me, to our culture, and to us at Conexión Americas. And we are a bilingual organization, so that's important for us to offer all of our information in English and Spanish. And we're working on some Arabic and Kurdish language work as well. This is just a small picture of all the work that we do at Conexión Americas. Like I said, we are a full wraparound service organization for all of our families. We empower our program participants by equipping them with the tools necessary to succeed as community members through work such as English classes for all 18 plus adults. We offer tax courses and filing help in the spring with the April deadline. We offer home ownership training so that families here can purchase homes and begin building that real estate power. And we help Latinos achieve more by offering parent engagement opportunities through our Padres Comprometidos programs, PAP, in which we offer parents a lot of the similar work that we do with our students, that I do with our students in education programs, so that they can be empowered to be part in their students' education lives as well, and to be school partners as well with their teachers and their administrators. We offer help with starting own businesses. And we do a lot of advocacy work as well. So we kind of really do a lot of the work that our community has shown they've needed since we got here in 2002 as an organization. I always like to start these presentations and this conversation with a little bit of, and you'll be familiar with this language as well, with some cultural competency and understanding about what Latino families are, what Latinos themselves are, and some really general context about our community and our families that really helps understand the work that we do in college access and success. And I like to start, let me back up here. I like to start with some definitions, which I think is always really helpful, of what exactly the word Latino means, what Hispanic means, because you hear those interchangeably a lot, and that's not always correct. And you might have heard a lot of these different terms and never really understood what they meant. And I think it's just always nice to start with a good general balance of all starting from the same place. So Latino, Latinx, and Latine all kind of refer to the same thing, and Hispanic's a little bit different. Like I write here, sometimes they're used interchangeably, But specifically Latino and Latina, which you probably have heard the most, is anyone from Latin America or born to Latin American parents, but not necessarily Spanish speakers. And that includes anywhere from the northern border of Mexico all the way down to the southern tip of South America, Chile and Argentina, including Brazil, which speaks Portuguese, Haiti, which speaks Haitian, and every Caribbean island in between that doesn't necessarily speak Spanish as their main language, and includes indigenous people as well. Latinx is a more recent term that is a gender neutral version of the term Latino and Latina. As you might know, Spanish is a gendered language, as all Romance languages are. And this is just one of the movements to make it more of an inclusive term to help include people who are gender nonconforming, who identify as Latinx. Latine is another gender neutral version of the term that's grammatically a little bit easier for Spanish speakers to use in their writing and their speaking. And then the word Hispanic, which was the term that was most generally used uh, until recently, is anyone from Spanish-speaking countries specifically, and not just on this side of the world, but that includes Spain as well. And it excludes, however, non-Spanish speakers from Latin America, like we talked about, Brazilians, Haitians, and other Caribbean islands. So all of these terms denote an ethnic group with some shared geography, in most cases, some common culture, some common heritage, some common language, but not all. And so those are really important. And a lot of times, our families will also tell you they identify most strongly with their country of origin. So, for example, for me, I am Latino, I'm also Hispanic, I'm an immigrant, and I'm Mexican. And that matters a lot to me that specifically I'm a Mexican American US citizen that's also a Mexican citizen. Now, the term immigrants also you've heard and we use very commonly. And that's any person that's living in a country other than their place of birth. And very important to remember, and this might seem a little bit elementary, but always helpful to know, that not every Latino student that we will encounter in our schools are immigrants. In fact, 65% of American Latinos are actually born here in the US, and you'll find that very commonly in our schools with our students. And then a specific note on English language learners, which is also a term you might have heard, is that not all Latino students are EL students, and that not all EL students are necessarily immigrants. And in fact, many American-born Latinos don't speak Spanish at all, and English is their primary language and their only language. As well as we'll get into this later, but mixed status homes where parents might be immigrants, one parent might be an immigrant, an older sibling, maybe a senior that you're working with is an immigrant, but their younger sibling is not. They were born here. And so they'll have different answers for college access. And a lot of times we'll break the news to students sometimes that they are not eligible for FAFSA, that they are not natural born citizens. And that's when we have to know this so that we can really communicate that to the students. Next, I want to go a little bit to understanding Latino cultural norms. And I'll use the word Latino in my presentation. That's the word that I'm most comfortable using. But that's not to be non-inclusive. Latinx, Latina, all good words to use. And you can ask your community which word they prefer. A lot when I write about present versus future is we ask kids what they want to be when they grow up. We talk about school transitions. We talk about when they're older. And we even know that the college process, or at least building toward it, starts at the very latest in the ninth grade. And that these conversations are happening across our communities outside of the immigrant and Latino experience, that this conversation is happening from a very young age. Latino families are more rooted in traditions. We have a way of doing things as usual. So a lot of that means multi-generational homes, kids living at home even after 18, and that the present, and some of that is impacted by context, by income, by the need to survive in a new country. And that's why sometimes it feels to parents and to kids and to our students that college is far away or something that they can do senior year in the spring before they graduate, something that they can only start learning about senior year because they're trying to focus on their now. And that's why this early education for us is so important to begin in ninth grade and middle school and elementary school, and to talk about post-secondary education as a real opportunity and a real pathway for our immigrant and our Latino students. Also, we always include parents in that conversation as well, and to tell them that this exists for them students even when they first arrive or when they're young. This personal relationship oriented versus time and professional, really important. That Latino families communicating and engage really personally, and it's building a lot of trust and relationship. and that sometimes you're going to be flexible with time, with professionalism, with punctuality with Latino families. Um, but it's really important to engage those families early, to build that college going culture, like I write, to partner with cultural experts like Conexion Americas, like Turk here in Nashville, with teachers, administrators in your schools, with the students themselves who are experts in their family and experts in their culture, and to do the research yourself. And this is a big part of that, and learning what those words mean, what the cultures are, and also knowing that they're not monolithic, that Mexican American families, even within that nation, have a lot of different cultures, and even more so when you expand to the entire of Latin America. So we'll talk a little bit about these norms, this culture, and how to really engage with families throughout this presentation. I'm going to pause here for a second for a quick reflection. And I like to do this when we're in person, but especially here when we're on Zoom, and especially when you can't bring yourself off mute, um, to ask questions. And if you don't have a partner with you, if you're doing this from your home, uh, to ask yourself for a second if you've seen this reflected in your own work, if these words, definitions have come up, if you've been confused about Latino, Latinx, Latina versus Hispanic, uh, and to check yourself too on whether you've thought of immigrants as all EL learners, of your Latino students as all immigrants or EL learners as well. Uh, and I'll ask if we have a second, if everyone's feeling brave this morning on a Friday, how this might impact your practice, or if any of this is new information, or if any of this is something that you're continuing to learn that you can bring back to your schools. Um, and if not, I'll also keep moving with the presentation if there's no questions in the chat, Sarah. No one feels bold enough on this Friday the 13th, but just wanted to spend a little bit of a reflection moment here because it's very heavy definition work here to start.
Sure. I don't see that we have any questions yet, but that's, I mean, you already answered, I think, what a lot of people do have questions about, which is how to best and most respectfully refer to our students, just simply in the terminology. So I think that's extremely, extremely helpful. Oh, we just had somebody share in the chat. I had no idea that the Latina, Latino, Latinx, Latine covered Caribbean countries too. So it's great information for us, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, and I think also, and Sarah, you mentioned this, but super important to just ask, right? It's
Sure.
instead of assuming, instead of kind of generalizing all students who look away or speak away, it's to ask individually and build that relationship with your students of how do they like to identify, and maybe having this conversation with them too, because a lot of times even the students won't know what the differences are, how they identify themselves. Um, and that's really important. And they might just say, I'm Mexican. Or they might say, I was born here, I'm a
Sure.
Tennessean. And for me, I like to joke a lot that I spent 6 years in Mexico and I've spent 21 in Tennessee. So I feel a lot more Appalachian a lot of times than I do Mexican. Um, uh, so it's always important to have that conversation at the school as well.
Sure. I also appreciate, just quickly, Julio, that you differentiated that not all English language learning students are immigrants. I think that's a very common misconception. And, you know, we have lots of students who have grown up only speaking Spanish and they were born here. And so I really do appreciate that you gave that distinction as well.
And similarly, that not all English language learners are Spanish speakers. And here in Nashville,
Correct.
we know that there are over 30 languages spoken in Metro Nashville Public Schools. And that the biggest population of Kurdish people outside of Iraq is here in Nashville, outside of Kurdistan. So really important to really have that knowledge in our head too.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. Well, I will keep moving. And we'll talk about specifically Latino families and college aspirations. So, like I mentioned earlier, but really important, is that family context and perceptions are super important. This is a big decision for families. It's a big economic decision. It's a big change of lifestyle decision. And it's really important to involve the entire family because the students will involve their entire family. There are very few Latinos who make decisions entirely on their own. Uh, my family's small. I have a single mom and my younger brother. And my decision when I was 17 involved the three of them. And it involved everyone in my extended family giving context, giving solutions, giving ideas, and brainstorming together. Uh, Also important that, and this is, I think, a really important distinction, is that just because you don't see the parent as much as you might see other parents, maybe they're not part of the PTO, maybe they're not in the teacher in the parent teacher conferences. maybe they don't speak the language and so they're afraid to come. Maybe because of their status, they don't come to the school or leave their homes, or they work 2 or 3 jobs. That doesn't mean that the parents aren't involved or they don't care, right? In fact, actually, parental aspirations in Latino families are extremely high. And the idea that your next generation wants to do better than you is a very common Latino idea. Just many times parents don't know how to support their children in this application, college going process, because either they didn't do it themselves or because they did it in a country where it's completely different. And I see that a lot, where even lawyers from places like Venezuela or Colombia or Mexico come here and have no idea how to help their students apply to undergraduate school here because it was a completely different process. Most families are very supportive of the college going process. They'll talk about college from a very young age. They love the idea of their students continuing to learn, continuing to grow. But you have to prioritize a lot of times work, caretaking responsibilities for younger siblings, and economic need. And when you have such an economic disparity and economic challenges in our Latino communities, this impacts the way we think about college going. A lot of parents won't want their students to attend out-of-state institutions or even out-of-city institutions and want to keep their families close. There's a lot of fear about family separation, and that's something that I don't have to tell you about. You've heard all about. But that's a conversation you have to have as well when the student especially shows great academic promise and wants to go out of state. Or, and we'll talk about this a little bit, when maybe the best financial solution is to go out of state because of tuition equity practices that we don't have here in Tennessee, that some surrounding states do have, like the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And then, of course, families will have a lot of questions about financial aid, don't know where to start, don't know where to ask, and that's where you'll come in as a financial aid expert. But really important to remember that all families want the best for their children, and that we as educators and as these guides and coaches have to always assume best intent from the families and the student, even when they don't know or when it's frustrating that you don't see them as much. So that's really important. Oh, let me go back. I keep double clicking. Of course, students in college going culture is going to be different for immigrant recent arrivals and then people who were born here and grew up here through K-12. Most of our students that we work with at Conexion Americas and in our Latino community here in Nashville are first-generation college students in the U.S. Some of those students might have had parents that attended school in a different country or are unfamiliar with the process here. A lot of them will feel disillusioned from an early high school age about how much work goes into college going, about the grades, the extracurriculars, the volunteering, the economics of it. They might think that because of their status or the money that they have no options and that it's impossible to go to college. And that's where we as educators have to be consistent about early positive messaging and saying that from the first moment you encounter the student, this is one of their opportunities that's open to them. Sometimes it'll take extra work, but that's why you're there to help them achieve those goals. Again, for any DACA students and other undocumented students, they're a diverse group who don't have individual distinguishable, they don't wear it on their armbands, they don't wear it on their face, but there's additional hurdles for them as well. And some of these students, like I've mentioned earlier, and I think someone mentioned in the chat, have been living here their entire lives. Maybe they got here like me when they were 6, maybe they got here when they were babies. And until they start applying to this and when they go into their FAFSA application and realize they don't have a social security number, a lot of times it'll fall to us to explain what that means. And that maybe the school that they really wanted to go to here in state, it's going to be really hard because it's going to be an out-of-state tuition cost, even though they've lived here for 17 years. And it is heartbreaking. I think I saw that in the chat that when you have to be the person to break that news to a family and to a student, and that's why we learned this, so that we can do a better job of bridging those gaps and finding other opportunities. And sometimes saying that it's just really hard and that those opportunities aren't going to be as open as some of their friends, their peers, or even their younger siblings a lot of times. Each student is unique, and so we have to come up with unique solutions for every student. Now I'm going to go, we've talked a little bit about some terms earlier. I'm going to talk about some immigration terms, which are really important for doing this work because it impacts how and what we can tell our students they're going to have to do to go to college. I'm going to show here a graph that's going to show you, because a lot of times you'll hear, do it the right way, right? You'll hear from people who don't like immigration, don't like immigrants here in the country, that do it the right way, or apply from your country, or to do it the legal way. And so if you really think about what that looks like, this is a very simplified graph of what the immigration process looks like in the United States. I'll give you a second to take this in because there's a lot happening on this graph. It's a little overwhelming to look at this. It might be shocking for some of you to see how many different ways there are to legal immigration, but especially how many ways there are to not becoming a legal immigrant here in the United States, and how hard it is to get permanent residence in the U.S. and then citizenship in the U.S. This is a complicated, nonlinear, diverse experience of immigrants. But you also have to remember that you don't have to be an immigration expert or an immigration lawyer to help our immigrant students. We just have to know where to go and where to look and who to ask. And again, if you want to see more about this graph, I can send this out so that you can have it with you, because this might help some of the students who don't know their status and some of the families who don't know their statuses as well. So some language and terms that I think are helpful. The first one being undocumented, which is any person who is lacking appropriate documentation to establish permanent residency in the United States. That permanent residency you might have also heard as a green card, which is the alien identification number and your permanent residence allowance here in the United States. A person who is unauthorized is someone who is lacking authorization to be present and or living in the United States currently. So that could mean someone who had a temporary visa, who had some kind of legal protection to be here, whether it's a refugee, someone who was here on a student visa and has overstayed that. And their legal visas are expired and now they are unauthorized to be here in the United States. DACA, of course, stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which was, and we'll talk about this as well a little bit later, but an executive action during the Obama administration that allowed young students who were brought here before a certain age to have legal action to go to college and to receive federal financial aid, but was not legal protected status. And that's very important to know, that DACA students do not have a pathway to citizenship. They have work authorization and they're able to get financial aid, but they do not have a pathway to citizenship. It's also important to know that DACA is not being renewed anymore and that new applicants to DACA are being denied. So any student you'll encounter with DACA is someone who's previously gotten it, and this is not something we can advise current non-DACA students to apply to because they won't get it, because it hasn't been reauthorized by the Congress. Dreamers and documented students are just youth who have benefited from the DREAM Act from DACA. Mixed status we talked about a little bit earlier, but it's just a household where at least one member is a citizen or a permanent resident, and other people may be undocumented, unauthorized DACA students, and there's different things happening in the school. In the home, excuse me. And then, of course, finally, a term that you might have heard a lot, maybe you've used, maybe you've heard other people use, with someone's illegal or an alien. And these are just really negative, dehumanizing, demonizing words that don't explain really anything about a human being, especially for early childhood arrivals. And a word that we try really hard to educate people not to use, because no human being is illegal and no human being is alien. They just happen to have different paperwork, no paperwork, and lack appropriate documentation to be here legally. One other term that's really important that you might hear in your schools and with your students is temporary protected status, which is granted to eligible foreign-born individuals with the right to live and work in the U.S. until the Department of Homeland Security decides to end their TPS status. Once that status expires, there's no legal path to citizenship and you become unauthorized. And that could happen really without warning. And it has happened without warning. This happens a lot for nations that have ongoing civil wars, environmental disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes, an epidemic. And a lot of times when that conflict resolves itself, or when it calms down, or when attention is drawn away from it, we end temporary protected status, and these people become undocumented, unauthorized, and a lot of times are deported back to their country of origin. The U.S. currently provides TPS to over 400,000 individuals from 10 different countries. Since 2017, DHS has let TPS expire for Haiti and Sudan, and a lot of students from Haiti and Sudan who live here in Tennessee and in Nashville. And at the same time, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, and Nepal, again, 4 countries that have a ton of immigrants here in the state, has also expired. But that, just as of the last couple of months, these terminations were rescinded, but that just goes to show that it changes very quickly and status changes very quickly. And these have only been extended to 2025. So again, in 2 years, we'll be having these conversations with these students from Nicaragua, Honduras, Nepal, El Salvador. And sadly, students with TPS, even though they might have a right to live and work here in the US, do not qualify for federal financial aid. And so that'll impact the decisions that they can make as college-going students. Another thing you might hear is a U visa, which is granted for those who are living here and are victim of violent crimes in their country of origins. They participate by filing police reports. It costs $585 to file each one of them. So a family of 4 would have to spend over $2,000 to apply for these visas. And only 10,000 are granted per year in the whole world to apply here for the U visa in the US. And they're behind 3 years in applying these applications and processing them. So, you're applying for that from your country where you're being a victim of violent crimes, or you're applying from here as an undocumented person living for 3 years so that's undocumented while this gets processed. And again, not eligible for federal financial aid. Oops. A couple of other terms that are important to know because they impact financial aid and applications are asylum and refugee. Asylum is granted to foreign-born individuals who have to prove that they're being persecuted in their country of nationality because of race, religion, or social group or political opinion. To seek asylum, which is a different thing from refugee status, someone must present themselves in person to the United States and request an asylum interview, which means you are coming here undocumented and you're living here undocumented while this goes through the initial interview, through the court case, while you get a lawyer, because you don't have a legal right to a lawyer in these cases. That's where you have to find it yourself. And then applicants are a lot of times released into the United States here to live undocumented while they await their court case. And this is a recent thing and could change with administration changes at the White House. You might have heard the Remain in Mexico policy. You're jailed while you're applying for asylum. And a lot of times these asylum cases aren't granted and you are given asylum pending status, which is not a protected status until it's granted, if it's granted. And then the refugee applies from outside the United States, and there's a legal cap on how many people can apply for this each year by Congress, and that changes every year. And it can take years for you to get the refugee status to move here to the United States. Again, we talked about DACA, executive action, not a legal status, no pathway to citizenship. Must have arrived before 2007. So as we go each year, less of these students are arriving by then because a lot of them are being born in 2007, which to me is a little scary when you see a student being born in 2007. But they have to have been the age of 16 or under as well. Be in school, they have to have graduated, no criminal history, and it costs $500 to file and renewed every 2 years, again, for those who have already been granted DACA status. They are not legal residents. They are not permanent residents. They do not count as legal in-state Tennessee residents and don't qualify for federal financial aid a lot of times, and definitely don't qualify for in-state tuition in the state of Tennessee. There are some states, and we'll talk like Kentucky, like I mentioned, that have tuition equity laws to enable students to access state aid as DACA students. Tennessee is not one of them. And unfortunately, what that means is that in local terms, in-state residents in Tennessee can attend a school like Middle Tennessee State for $9,000 a year in tuition, while DACA students who get into MTSU, who might have lived here their whole lives, pay full out-of-state tuition costs, which starts at $28,000. So obviously a huge difference, as well as their status could be changed at any time. And that's why we send a lot of students like this out of state to Kentucky and other places with tuition equity. And you might have heard even about tuition equity, that we were really close to achieving it in Tennessee about 3 years ago when it came up in the state legislature. And we were 1 vote short of passing tuition equity in the state of Tennessee. The 1 vote short was a person, a state legislator, who decided not to come to work that day because he didn't want to vote on this topic. And since then, we have gotten further and further away from getting anything closed legally. And the state legislature last year didn't take it out of committee. So the work continues, but it's getting a lot harder in our state legislature to pass tuition equity. Again, I've mentioned this already, so I won't spend too much time on it, but we are not granting or processing any new applications. And the renewal varies on processing time from 1.5 to 6 months. So again, very difficult process and not something we can rely on for any of our new students. If you have DACA students who have questions about their status, who have questions about their applications, there's a couple of really good local resources in Nashville who do a lot of state work as well if you're outside of the city, outside of Davidson County. The Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, TURC, Justice for Our Neighbors, JFUN, us at Conexion Americas do a lot of advising. And to stay updated with the news on DACA, you can unfollow some of the stuff that we follow, which is Immigrants Rising and United We Dream, which are national organizations that track a lot of this work. Why does this matter in terms of college going and college access? Is because immigration status matters when it comes to financial aid, which is the biggest obstacle to go into college is the money. The eligible non-citizens, non-US citizens that apply and receive federal financial aid are conditional permanent residents, lawful permanent residents with green cards, refugees, and asylum granted cases. Students who have asylum pending cases are not eligible for federal financial aid. And there's also a lot more that I won't be able to cover because there's a lot of different legal statuses. This is just another quick graphic of how you qualify for financial aid. And you'll see these are very limited and don't include all of the students that we will interact with. And a lot of times you'll have to tell them that they will not qualify for federal financial aid and that they won't even be able to apply to FAFSA because they don't have a social security number. And so that's important language to know that as you're having FAFSA nights at your school, in your community, as you're talking to parents, your blanket rule can't just be fill out the FAFSA and you'll get money for it. You can't just look at a parent's tax returns or work permits or slips and say, oh, you for sure will qualify for need-based financial aid, because that is not always true. So we have to know this so that we can advise parents correctly so that they don't, in December when the application opens to FAFSA, log on and in the first minute realize, oh, I can't do this. And now you've passed the entire fall semester without any other options. And a lot of times those applications will be closed for scholarships, for private aid, and for some of these schools that accept non-citizen students. When you're talking to students, really important language, not to make assumptions about whether a student is undocumented because of what you know about them, what you see about them. There's undocumented students from everywhere in the world, not just from Latin America. That there's mixed status homes, that there's DACA students. It's common for citizen siblings to have undocumented siblings. Don't assume that because a student is a citizen, their parents are citizens or their siblings are citizens. Don't keep a formal list of student information that says they're undocumented. Schools are not allowed legally to request or maintain lists or file student statuses, so you shouldn't either. Even if you have good intent, that's something you should keep on a trust-based conversation status with your students. Don't give students immigration advice or legal advice because we're not lawyers. And don't assume that students will know their immigration status or understand the implications for their college-going process, as we've already talked about. And now this is where the part of the conversation where I start talking about how we interact with our students, how we talk to our students. A student might reveal to you their immigration status because you've built trust with them, that they think you'll understand, you'll be accepting. They've identified something that you both share in common, whether it's the relationship you've built, racial, cultural, other affinity, maybe because you've talked about this openly and say, I want to be a resource for you. One thing you can do very easily to signal this is fixing your language and never saying illegal or alien in your school and correcting other teachers and other students who say this. If you have a counseling office or an application center or something in your school, you can put up the international symbol or the national symbol for undocumented students protections, which is the monarch butterfly. If you have a monarch butterfly on your window, on your door, on your desk, that can signal to a student that you are a safe person to talk to about immigration status. Maybe they'll come to you and talk to you about the status because they can't complete their applications. They're filling out their application for college and it's asking for a social security number, or it's asking them if they're a citizen or permanent resident. They log into the FAFSA, they make their FSA ID, and they can't do anything else. Maybe because they know you're in a position to assist them because you're the college access coordinator in your school. You're the school counselor talking about college. You're having Tennessee Promise nights in your community, or you're having a Tennessee Promise application day in your school, and these students can't do it. And that's where you have to be really thoughtful about, how do I make sure that these students, without outing them to the whole school, without calling them over the intercom and saying undocumented students come to the office for this application question, how do I make sure that I'm doing this in a correct way, in a safe way, while giving them the safety that they really need with status? Or maybe just because another student has told you and talked to you about this before, and you are being recommended by that student. Whatever the reason, we have to honor that they have shown us enormous trust, that they care enough about their own process to come talk to you about it, and to hold that close to us, that they're trusting us with not just themselves, but their family status, which is really, really important. And very dangerous, and we're really recognizing that too. One thing that we talk about in our Undocu Ally training is when a student reveals to them, they're jeopardizing a relationship with you, they're jeopardizing a legal status and a protected status with you, they're risking being rejected, being denied, and unless you have given really good indications, they have no idea of knowing whether that this will help them, it'll be a positive or a negative relationship. So it's on us. The onus is on us to build that relationship so that they feel comfortable when they share. Your reaction is critical when this happens because we can't anticipate it, right? No one's going to send you an email. Student's not going to email you and say, hey, I want to come talk to you about my legal status. Please prepare. Don't say, ask them, you're illegal, you don't have papers, how did you get here? Explain everything about your immigration status. That's horrible, that sucks, everything's gonna be fine. And this one's really important. This one, a lot of times people wonder why it's here, because we don't know that everything's gonna be fine. Because these statuses are really dangerous to live with. There could be an immigration raid, like happened in my own high school community when I was in high school, where you come home from school and your parents are deported, or they're in jail. Or you find out that you don't qualify for federal financial aid. The school of your dreams doesn't accept undocumented students. There's a dream that's broken right there. Everything is not always going to be fine. And you also can't tell them that you're going to have to tell a teacher, a counselor, report it to a principal or whatever. What we can say is thank them for trusting us, protecting their privacy, and asking them if they feel comfortable connecting them with resources, sharing with other people, asking them how they want to be supported, telling that you might not have all the answers and that you're going to need some time to research, to ask communities, organizations that do this work, and asking them if that's okay. Asking if they have ideas on what they need from you. And then just really thanking them and telling them that you're proud of them for advocating for themselves and for trusting you. That's always really important and really affirming to students. Something we can do is, again, honoring students' trust and vulnerability. This is also a conversation that very generally is called coming out, in the same way that LGBT students come out. A student coming out as undocumented, unauthorized, is a really important point in their lives and a very scary point in their lives. We can encourage them to access local support groups in your community, in the state. We encourage older students to come and talk to our students about it, to follow reliable information resources, follow the sources yourself, be honest with students that being a citizen does make pathways to college and career easier, and that this will make it harder for them, because that's just the truth, and that there's going to be extra work that they're going to have to do, but that there are possibilities and there's pathways that are still open. Also, if you hear like me, a lot of times we'll share student once we get our status. Now that I'm a naturalized citizen, I'm empowered and I have privilege to talk about this in my experience of 10 years being undocumented. If you connect with students who you have worked with before, or educators who you've worked with before, who have shared that they're undocumented, that can be a really powerful way to invite an open conversation into the school by saying, here's someone I know who used to be undocumented, or maybe who is undocumented and talks about it very openly. And this is a person that you can begin to start trusting and building a relationship with in your school. Again, if you have to ask students about status, you have to be really careful, because technically schools cannot inquire about immigration status under Apply versus Doe. So you have to think about it carefully, context and relationship. You're not asking it out of the blue. You're asking it if you're sitting with a student, you've built a good relationship, and you're going through their application, and boom, there's a question about social security number. And that's where you don't have to ask, are you undocumented? You can start with the question, do you know if you have a social security number? Gauge what the response is and then go from there. Don't store this information in any official capacity. Don't write it down. Don't put it in your computer. Don't email it. Don't print it. Have the resources available. Never do it in a public place in front of other students. And try to match their response. A lot of times we say this to our teachers, but if you're cool about it, they're going to be cool about it. And again, just a couple phrases here to respond to students of, thank you for your honesty, vulnerability. I'm sorry this was hard to talk about. It's okay to feel emotional. It's okay if you feel emotional. You can be glad that you had this conversation and be at the same time not glad that this is what they have to experience. Tell them very honestly that this will change some of the plans about college application. It might change some of their dreams, but that you're there to help and that you appreciate them sharing. And let them know that they're welcome to reach out to you at any point. And you can share other resources. Like, here's a community member that I know that you can also talk to. That's really important. I'll share a couple of final thoughts here as I'm nearing the end of time. I want to leave time for comments, responses, questions. All of this is really, really complicated, and it changes all the time. Legal statuses are changed. We're going into a presidential election year where this will come up again. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to stay informed, right? Only lawyers should be giving legal advice about immigration policies, eligibility, but you can connect them with those legal resources. To consider students' mental health and well-being as you're having these conversations. To refer to and to find yourselves trustworthy organizations for questions, trustworthy resources, news sources, and that in the coming year, as we enter a presidential election cycle, which always brings out the nastiest conversations about immigration, to be really mindful of that as it's happening in your school, in your communities, in the state, in the country, and to build a really safe, inclusive environment in your own school where you can control it, where this kind of conversation, these kinds of topics aren't welcome, and that every student, regardless of their status, is a vibrant piece of your school mosaic. And reminding that and stepping in when you hear a student or a teacher say something politically charged, negatively charged, using these words, and being an active bystander to protect those students who are in your school. And so very quickly, another reflection, this is the elementary school teacher in me that we always have to do a little bit of reflection work, is something that we've learned today. And hopefully we've all learned something, whether it's additional knowledge that kind of deepens our previous knowledge or something entirely new. And that's something we can think about, we can share in the chat, you can share with a colleague. And if you had to share this with a colleague who wasn't here today, who you think would really learn a lot from this, how would you bring this up to them? What would you say to them? How would you have that conversation? And one that I don't write on here, but it's also really important, is how do we train ourselves to do that work that's going to be really important, is stepping into and correcting maybe someone who's above you, a principal, an administrator, a school board member, or a teacher that you hear, or another staff member in your school, or a student. How do you step in when one of your students says something really hateful, really hurtful, and how do you correct that in the school? And it's going to be really important because I know it's going to come up. The presidential election cycle pretty much already started, but in January and moving forward will happen a lot. And it happened a lot even in my elementary schools. And then to end very quickly, I want to share a little bit about our programs and how you can engage with us, because this is work I do statewide. These are presentations that I always do. So if your school is really hungering for this kind of work and it's really hungering for this kind of information, you can contact me and we can do this presentation for your school, for your in-service, for your counselors, for your community. I can also do this work if you're having those kinds of FAFSA nights, those Tennessee Promise application days in your schools, and you have this group of students. I can do this class presentation as well and talk to the students about their own opportunities and pathways that they have as undocumented, unauthorized DACA. And then these are the programs that we have here in Nashville that we can replicate across the state if your school is interested. And we can have that conversation offline, or you can email me. The first one is our Escalera program, which is a college access after school activity for juniors and seniors, all open to all first generation students, not just Latinos, who meet with a college advisor for 2 hours once a week, and they get every resource with them. We do the college application with them, the FAFSA application with them. We help them find private scholarships for those who don't qualify. We help them find schools that are going to be good allies. We connect them. We bring them, like I said, this week, we bring them to college visits. We do as much of the work we can for college and career readiness. We do internships. We do resume workshops, interview rallies. We bring businesses into the schools to talk about, if you don't want to go to college, about how you can get better jobs. We bring in TCATs. We bring in community colleges. We do all of that work in our Escalera program. And then once we graduate those students from the high school and they get into their programs, they graduate into what we call the Escalera Grads College Access Program, because we know another problem is not just enrollment, but retention. And this is a program that for 4 years supports a student from the beginning of the program to the completion. So we make sure we're credentialing and graduating all of our students who get into post-secondary. And then we also have a connection with Europe, which is a cohort-based program nationally where we do this work for Spanish speakers, specifically here in Nashville as well. Right now, we're only at 3 high schools: Glencliff High School, Overton High School, and Cambridge High School, as well as auxiliary programs at Antioch High School. But if you're in the near area, if you're in the state, and you want to hear more about these programs, you can email me. And I'm going to share one more thing, and then I'll stop sharing and open for questions. But here, this is my own work, which I don't just do supervise these programs, but I also do what we call our community appointments. So I do this same work that Escalera program does for students who aren't in those high schools and students who don't live here in Metro Nashville Public Schools. I do post-secondary preparation, financial aid and scholarship work. I do college application essay workshops as well, for free to any student and a family member, whether they're in high school, they're recently graduated from high school, who want to go to college. And I can send this out to and share with all of you as well, but you can share this with any student. They can make an appointment. They can meet with me via Zoom. They can meet with me at Casa Azafran, which is our community center, specifically for Latinx and immigrant students. But we do this work for any student who's not in our service high schools too, because there's a lot of need out there. And we want to make sure that we are really responding to the need of that community, not just in our 3 high schools, but everywhere in Davidson County and in the entire state of Tennessee. So I did okay on time. We've got 5 minutes left, but yeah, that's Conexion Americas does a lot of this work. I do all of this work every day, and really want to engage with you in your schools, with you as counselors, with you as educators, and with any of your students who you've come up to a wall of, I don't know how more to help. That's where I can come in and fill in some of those gaps.
Sure. Thank you so much, Julio. That was such great information. I learned something new about the undocumented versus, what was the other term? Unverified?
Unauthorized, yeah.
Unauthorized. I did not know that. So I'm really glad to have learned that. Yeah, I think that probably quite a few of our people would be interested in maybe having a presentation at their school, or like you said, for a FAFSA night. I think all of that would be super helpful. It's really great to know that just that you and that your group are so willing to help out students. I just have a question for you. I'm
Yeah.
sure that you've seen through the work that you've done here, obviously a lot of this is hard and it's heavy, and those of us who work with those students and student-facing capacities, it can feel pretty heavy to have so many students, kind of like what you were saying, being honest about this is going to change dreams, or it's going to change, maybe what they thought they could do. Would you mind just to share, is there a story that you feel comfortable sharing about just like a big win that you feel like you had, or that you got to see a student really succeed, or maybe a student who ended up gaining that resident status and really being able to go after their dream? I think that might be just very empowering and encouraging for us to hear. Is there anything that
Yeah,
comes to mind for
totally.
you?
Yeah. I love that question, Sarah, to end here on an inspiring, that this can happen, and this happens all the time. And this is why our program exists, because we know it can work and it can happen for these students. The achieving citizenship status is the hardest thing that any student can do. And so we don't have a lot of those success stories. We still have students who graduate from college and don't necessarily have the same opportunities post-secondary after college because they're still undocumented, even though they have a degree. One thing that was a big win legally was a couple of years ago, our state legislature actually did something very progressive and legally allowed certifications to work in the state of Tennessee for undocumented students and for undocumented workers to get their licenses to perform a lot of that service industry work. So it's like cosmetology, which is a big thing that a lot of our students want to do, so that they can actually legally work in the United States, even without documentation. So that was a big legal win. And those can happen when advocacy comes together, when teachers and parents and counselors and students all come to the legislature and say, we know you're not going to give us tuition equity yet. We know you're not going to give us protected in-state status residency. Let us work. There's a huge need after the pandemic for workers to be able to have legal authorization to work, and we did that. So that was a big win and a big thing that Conexion Americas was a big part of. One of our student wins that I actually just had recently was a senior who came to us who did not know that she was undocumented, did not know about federal financial aid, uh, and thought she had a 4.0 GPA, had a 27 on her ACT, extracurriculars at the wazoo, uh, community service, everything. A perfect college applicant who really wanted to stay here and go to Belmont. And Belmont's a great school that does a lot of private scholarships for our students. And it's actually one of the places that we partner with the most. But when she applied and realized that her expenses were going to be a lot different than the full ride that she was hoping for, she got, obviously very upset and thought that it was over and that she wasn't going to be able to go to school because she couldn't afford any out-of-pocket cost at all. And we had to do a lot of work to get her back into our program and to say, this is still possible for you. We looked at other places. We applied to a bunch of places, applied to some scholarships. And one place that we were able to connect with, and something I mentioned earlier, was Western Kentucky University, which offers tuition equity and offers in-state tuition to any state that borders the Commonwealth of Kentucky. She applied and got accepted immediately because they send application decisions on a rolling basis and got a full ride. And now she's going to start college in the fall at Western Kentucky on a full ride. She's going to graduate in 4 years, be part of our grad program without any debt, with a bachelor's degree, the first in her family to go to college. Uh, and she's really excited. And I've been really excited to share with her and to connect with how great a school Western Kentucky has been as a partner with us, and that it's only really an hour away from here, and that it doesn't change a lot of that family part, that she can still come home as much as she wants. Her family can come up and visit her. And we've connected her with a lot of the experiences that she didn't know she was going to get to do, which is live on campus, live in a dorm. She's a hilltopper now, and she's wearing her big red stuff all the time. Um, and that's why we do it, right? Uh, and yeah, Suzette, that's great. I love Western Kentucky. Um, it's a school that we partner with a ton because it does really great work for recognizing these students that just need the financial help to be able to go there. So that's a big win, that a student whose dreams crashed in one day is now a college-going senior. So we're really excited for her.
I'm sure that is very encouraging to see. And I can imagine that was really tough for her, but I'm glad that she had that kind of support. And to know about things like tuition equity, I think all of that is super valuable for us as professionals to know about too, to be able to refer our students.
Totally, because the answer is not always go to an in-state school. It'll be cheaper.
Right.
Yeah, so for sure important to know.
Well, it is for some students, but for other students, you're exactly right. Just knowing even a better picture of their personal situation can help us kind of adjust those recommendations that we make to them as well. Yeah. I think that's fabulous. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. I think, Julio, if people want to get in contact with you, they can scan that QR code, I think, that you shared.
Yeah, so let me drop my email here in the chat as well.
Sure, that would be great.
Julio@connectionamericas.org.
Okay.
And I can send out the presentation to you and Suzette as well. I can send out this flyer as well that I shared. and please feel free to share that with anyone.
That would be great. Well, I just want to say a big thank you from all of us. We really appreciate you taking the time, and just it's very obvious how passionate you feel about this, and just with your own personal history and story, it's very encouraging to see. So we just want to thank you, Julio. I want to thank everybody, all of our participants for coming today, for hearing about this. Even just a small thing, an hour on a Friday, I really feel strongly can make a difference in some of our students' lives. So I just want to thank everybody for coming in, for learning about all this, and then obviously thank you to Conexion Americas for their work and for allowing you to do this with us. So we really appreciate you all.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Suzette. Thank you all for joining. I hope the last 2 days of Hispanic Heritage Month, it ends on Sunday. So go support a Latino business this weekend, go to the Nashville soccer game, buy some Latino food, and watch something in Spanish.
Okay. I like that idea. That sounds like some good weekend plans, some ways that we can celebrate that together. So thank you, Julio, very much. And again, thank you everyone for joining, and we will hopefully see you on our next webinar for TN. So thanks so much for joining.
Thank you all.